Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Aisha and today we're going to be giving you some top tips for marriage. Whether you're looking to get married or whether you are already in an established marriage, these should be useful inshallah. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, to download my free downloadable printable journal to help you keep your life organized inshallah. Let's begin. So the first tip is to understand the purpose of marriage. Now this might seem really obvious, but it's actually very important, something that I feel like, especially when I speak to the youth of today, the teens who are thinking about getting married soon inshallah, that they don't have a realistic concept of why they're getting married. So obviously, when we're getting married in Islam, it's ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're doing it to fulfill half our faith or half of our iman, which is well known, and lots of us already know this. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did say, whoever amongst you is able to marry, and whoever isn't able to marry, it's recommended for them to fast, because fasting diminishes your sexual desire. This hadith emphasizes that through marriage you can preserve your chastity and seek Allah's pleasure by doing something that's lawful and that's halal in terms of a relationship. You also marry for companionship and support, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes marriage in the Quran as a garment. Just as when you wear clothes, they provide you with physical protection, they keep you warm, they adorn you. Marriage is something where you're offering each other physical and emotional support. Your spouse should be the person that you confide in. They should be that best friend for you. You should be there for each other no matter what, supporting each other in terms of when things are hard and when things are good, in joy and in hardship. Another reason that we get married is for procreation and raising children within a halal structure unit. Okay, and this is one of the noble purposes of marriage. It's so that we can have children and raise them in an environment that nurtures their physical, social and emotional well-being within this family unit. Another reason is so that we can spiritually grow and we can learn how to have different virtues. So by being married, you have to go through trials of patience, compassion, forgiveness, selflessness. Through this you can draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and protect yourself from doing what's haram, from sins. Marriage is also a source of blessing and barakah in every aspect of your life. It should bring you peace and happiness and contentment in your home, and a means of earning blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The foundation to understand is that your purpose behind marriage is to fulfill half of your faith, inshallah. There are other reasons as well. Let's look at those. So now that we've understood the purpose behind why we get married, let's have a look at some other tips that can help us when it comes to marriage. One of the really important ones is seeking compatibility. This is essential. So when you're thinking about marriage, inshallah, you're assuming this person's going to be your lifelong partner. So it's really important to consider that you share the same values, you share the same outlook on life, you share the same goals. And the reason I'm saying this is because sometimes I see couples who get together who are from very different cultures and backgrounds, and sometimes that's okay because they know what they're getting into, then they research the other person's culture. But sometimes they don't know at all, and it's like they get a shock and they start clashing once that sort of initial phase of the honeymoon phase is over and they've gone through with the ceremony. Or often this manifests itself when it comes to children. And I even have parents who approach me in my parenting workshops who say they've got one view of how they want to bring their children, or they're invested in taking a course and improving their parenting tips, but then they might have a partner who's not interested or wants to do things a different way, a traditional way, not necessarily the best way. And this is something to consider before you get married, or even early on in the marriage, to have these discussions, because they can cause a problem later on if you're not compatible with each other. And it's not just compatibility in terms of the culture and the background. There's emotional compatibility as well, and I think this one is often overlooked, but it's so important. This is when you can really connect with each other on an emotional level, and you can fulfill each other's emotional needs, which as human beings we all have. Sometimes what we see in relationships is one person is fulfilling the other person's emotional needs, but they're not fulfilling that person's emotional needs. And the way this causes problems is later on in life, you see a breakdown in terms of the marriage or the relationship, or a person goes elsewhere to fulfill these emotional needs, which they shouldn't be doing. But it's something to think about when you're thinking, is that person compatible with me? Are they intellectually compatible? Sometimes you want to have conversations with each other on certain topics, and it might be that person's got zero interest. So I'm not talking about hobbies which might be related or might be different that you do together, but intellectually, when you're having a discussion with that person, are they able to understand what it is that you're saying or where you're coming from? This is also something really important to consider. And the reason why I'm saying this is because sometimes, especially the youth, we see them and they find a potential marriage partner and they get really excited, and they are more in love with the idea and more excited by the idea of getting married rather than what the marriage entails. So they're not bothered about the compatibility of the person, because they might look at their looks and think, oh, that's a great person, without really thinking, are they compatible for me in the long term? So they might be more interested in the venue, how they're going to do the actual wedding, what they're going to wear, really become fixated on those things without thinking about the bigger picture of marriage. Another really important tip is communication and understanding. Again, I can't emphasize how important this is. When I say effective communication, it's to do with understanding each other's expectations, needs, boundaries before you even get married, or if you're already married, then during your marriage as well. Because oftentimes problems occur when either the husband or the wife don't communicate to each other what the problem or the issue is. And sometimes they don't feel comfortable in doing this, and sometimes they don't even think that they should be doing this, and instead they'll go out and seek advice from a third party, or they'll speak to a family member, or they'll involve friends without actually getting clarification from their partner, or even communicating with the partner that this is how I feel, these are the issues that I feel like we're having, or can you explain X, Y, and Z and why this has happened. And I feel like this often happens not when you're newly married, but it can happen when you're newly married, but I've seen it happen in relationships that are quite established. So you might be married for quite a while and get into some sort of a routine where you feel like everything's okay on the surface, but maybe deep down it isn't for both of you, for either of you. So it might be because you're busy with work, you're busy with children, you're busy with your life, but from inside there are issues which will manifest themselves if you don't address them. So it's really important to be able to take some time out with just the two of you and speak to each other if there are any matters that are bothering you, or if there are any misunderstandings that you can clear up by speaking to each other, inshallah, and trying to be understanding with each other when you're speaking to each other. Another tip is to understand the rights that you have on each other. Okay, the wife has rights over the husband has rights over the wife. Make sure either attend a marriage course or make sure you understand what these rights are. Make sure you understand what the expectations are. For example, if you've got an expectation as a woman that you're going to be working after you get married, have you communicated this with your with your future husband? Is he aware of this? So if you're fulfilling your rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained upon each other, then this should lead to a successful marriage, inshallah. Another top tip is to exercise patience and forgiveness. And I've spoken about patience a lot under different circumstances before. Another really important point to consider is to exercise patience and forgiveness. Now, I've mentioned patience lots of times before and how virtuous a person is that can exercise patience, especially when you go through trials, which I've also mentioned before that everybody goes through, and marriage is no different. Every marriage will experience the ups and downs, okay? And every marriage will come with its challenges. And I feel like we live in a day and age where society is so fast paced that even when people have problems, they're quick to put them out there, whether they tell people that they shouldn't be telling, whether they involve people they shouldn't be involving, or, you know, oftentimes I've seen people just post it all over social media for the whole world to analyze and scrutinize and offer advice on things that they don't know about. They don't know about your situation. They don't know about the bigger picture. So it's better to seek that advice from somebody that you trust. But first and foremost is for you yourself, both of you, to exercise a level of patience and forgiveness towards each other, because marriage is teamwork, okay? It's about compatibility, but it's also about being flexible with each other within reason, and understanding that sometimes things will go wrong, and look at it from an Islamic perspective within the Quran and the Sunnah and how you should be dealing with difficulties. But be ready, you know, to forgive things that can be forgiven, and when difficulties happen, and be ready to exercise patience when you're going through trials. Inshallah, with time things will get better, but look at the bigger picture. Like, if you don't forgive what's happened, what's going to be the alternative, and are you prepared to deal with those consequences? Is that option the best option for you, for your children, if you have children? So sometimes we get quite irrational when we're making decisions, and, you know, we don't really sit down and contemplate and think about the bigger picture and everything that's happened and the context that it happens within. So that's really important as well. The most important thing is to maintain your faith. Maintain a taqwa, a fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you can do this, first and foremost, it should be a massive help for you in your marriage, okay? Things like salah, offer salah together, encourage each other to offer your salah, so then it becomes a norm for your children, because when you down the line, inshallah, have children, this is what they'll see. They'll see your relationship with each other. They'll see the actions you do with each other. They'll see your relationship with each other. They'll see the actions. They'll see the words that you use with each other. So, you know, if you're putting Islam first and foremost when you're speaking, and you're speaking respectfully to each other, when you're doing different forms of ibadah, so you're reading Quran, read it together, okay? If you're going to a lecture in the masjid, go together as a couple. If you're offering salah at home, offer it together, or at least remind each other, okay? And this will create not only love between you both, but also it'll be an example for your children, and also it'll put barakah between you, because you're doing it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're, you know, trying your best and maintaining this halal relationship for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, that should strengthen your connection as well with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with each other. So I've already mentioned children, but when you raise children, raise them with Islamic values, and make sure that you're on the same page about how you want to raise your children, how you want to instill a good character within them. This is the best thing that you can do, is instill good character in your children, and make sure that you're on the same page. And I say this in my parenting classes. Children are very clever, so if they know that, you know, one parent's a bit lenient and the other one isn't, or they can get away with doing certain things with one parent but not with the other, then it's like you're both giving out different messages to the child. It's mixed messages, and it's not good for the child. And try and think about this when they're children, if, to be honest, before they're born, but when they're babies, certainly not when they're very grown up, because when they get to teenage age, that's when it starts getting harder, difficult. But if you have put these steps into place from beforehand, and you're thinking about all these things, and you're trying your best to create that environment in your house, then that should massively help you, inshallah. Of course, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well when it comes to your children. But if you've discussed with each other what you want to do and how you want to bring them up, then that should also be quite helpful for you, inshallah. Sometimes I see parents who wait quite a while and then start bringing their children to the masjids, or then start thinking about, I think I'll introduce a bit of Islam to them. But it should be done in quite a natural way. It should be part of your life. It should be within your home environment, or even if you go out anywhere, rather than something that you all of a sudden introduce to them, and it'll be an alien concept for them as well, and it'll take time for them to learn and adapt. And if they're quite older, who's to say that they're going to accept what you've introduced them to if that's not what they've been used to? Okay, so think about that from beforehand. Also, remember that children learn from example. So the way that you are with each other, that will be their idea of what a successful marriage looks like. Another really important point is, if you're going through difficulties or you feel like you're in a situation that you need to get out of, so I'm talking about things like where abuse is involved of any kind, then go out and seek support. I've seen a lot of situations in which, unfortunately, a person doesn't do this and they stay within the marriage just so I've heard people say that other people don't talk bad of them, or they don't bring shame on the family, or they don't or because it's the easiest thing to do, when from inside they're quite ill because of that. I'm not talking about little problems that you can sort out or that you can solve or that you can talk through. I'm talking about if there's like serious big issues involved in which the marriage is unfortunately no longer compatible. I've seen people where they've just stayed together and put on this facade of being married and being a couple, when actually from inside they're not fulfilling each other's rights at all. Sometimes they're living completely separate lives to each other. Sometimes they're engaged in a lot of haram activities, but they are still together just because they are afraid that society doesn't label them as as a couple that's divorced. But you have to think to yourself from an Islamic perspective, what's the correct thing to do? And you must seek advice from a learned person or a counselor or someone that's in a position to offer that advice. And again, this is a really serious issue, but I'm saying this because I've seen, unfortunately, people who will just stay together, but they're not fulfilling any of the marital rights upon each other. They're not even happy, and sometimes there's a lot of abuse involved and they're just tolerating the abuse, but then that's having a knock-on effect on their children as well, because obviously the children will see that at some point and it will impact upon their behavior and it'll become harder and harder. But or the couple will stay, pretend that they're together, but they'll be engaging in other activities that they shouldn't be engaging in because they're not happy with each other at all. And that will go to such an extreme that they won't even be bothered anymore about what they're doing, which is a sad reality. But as I've said, this is something that's going on today. So inshallah, I hope those tips have helped you. And inshallah, I hope those tips have helped you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.